Hey everyone, it's Sevi. To finally wrap up my series on Nahida's teams and guide videos, this last one will tackle her Bloom and Melt comps with a quick mention of two more niche comps. I'll be showcasing samples of these teams and explaining certain mechanics you'll want to note with them. If you haven't seen the previous videos, be sure to check them out since this is a direct continuation of them. With that, let's begin. Starting off is the most vanilla Bloom-based team, a pure Bloom team, which essentially starts with Hydro and Dendro. Then the two flex slots are combos of Dendro, Hydro, Cryo, Animo, or Geo, elements that won't disrupt the Bloom reaction. Nahida is a huge quality of life upgrade for Bloom teams compared to previous Dendro Traveler and Collei options. She's not limited by an AoE, her Dendro conveniently reapplies itself, and she overall improves the core generation potential of the team. While Nilou allows you to achieve the peak potential of Bloom, there are still possible good non-Nilou Bloom teams, and at least you don't have the Hydro Dendro only restriction. But you'll need either a healer or shielder to counteract Bloom's self-damaging mechanic. Kokomi and Barbara are effective as Hydro triggers for AoE Hydro application. They can be built with EM while also fulfilling the healer role. The two slots can offer some flexibility depending on what you have available and if there are other utilities you want to add. The first sample showcases having an Animo for crowd control and Cryo to freeze the enemy. The freeze reaction does not interrupt the Bloom reaction, and this creates what's commonly referred to as a fridge team. I personally prefer having an Animo or Cryo or even both, as that gives the team added crowd control utility. There are many good 4-star Cryo units. You can start with the default Kaya, then opt for other options like Diona who can shield, heal, and give an EM buff at C6, or Rosaria who's a good off-field DPS and Cryo applicator. Here, Barbara is the main trigger, so she's using a full EM build. It's also possible that Nahida triggers blooms, though this is more likely to happen if there are several sources of Hydro, like if you put a double Hydro in the team. Sucrose can also trigger blooms if you swirl and infuse her burst with Hydro, but since she and Nahida are built with a lot of EM by default, then it's fine if they do. You can also add in Zhongli or Albedo since Geo units won't interrupt with Bloom. Now let's move on to the blooming queen, Nilou.
But Sevi, I want to feel like I have the power of Nilou Bloom teams. Without Nilou, what if you put EM on everyone? No Anemo or Cryo like a true Nilou team.
Let me weave you a verse. Oh, my sword! Ha! Germinate! A minute to never. Taurus, bring refuge! Springboard! Billowing surge!
Thank you for the cursed showcase, haha.
Anyway, having Nilou enables the ultimate Bloom team. Before, the recommended template of Nilou's teams were 2 Hydro and 2 Dendro, as the 1 Hydro slot would occupy Kokomi or Barbara for healing, while the 2 Dendros provide enough Dendro application to maintain consistent core generation. Now with Nahida, Nilou is more viable with a 3 Hydro unit team while still keeping up good Bloom generation. This was not possible before since Dendro Traveler or Collei could not apply Dendro as well as Nahida, whereas Nahida can take an on-field presence to apply Dendro with both her auto attacks and skill. Now that there are 3 Hydro sources, there's more possibility of Nahida proccing the blooms, which is good news because you naturally build her with high EM. You may still see some Hydro-triggered blooms, but since Nilou is buffing the cores anyway, it's unnecessary to force your Hydro units into EM builds. So for the first showcase, we're replacing Dendro Traveler with Xingqiu, who's a great candidate to assume the 3rd Hydro slot. Aside from his Hydro application, he offers resistance to interruption and damage reduction, which was lacking in Nilou's previous optimal teams. Note that Xingqiu's damage reduction does not reduce the damage Bloom or transformative reactions do to you, but regardless, it still reduces other forms of damage. At the end of the day, it helps keep you alive, especially if Nahida is used on field since she's squishy. Xingqiu also gives you self-healing from his rain swords, which adds up to another source of healing. Since you can potentially have better Bloom generation, you do lose HP a bit faster. So if ever you need emergency healing, just switch to your dedicated healer, Barbara or Kokomi, and use their bursts. Until a Dendro healer comes along, they'll be very attached to Nilou teams. While the triple Hydro plus Nahida template is now very viable, the conventional double Hydro double Denjo Nilou team is still a solid template. In that case, it's highly preferable to use Denjo Traveler over Collei, but Collei can still do the job. Basically, Nahida is a godsend for Nilou mains wanting the best Nilou team. Of course, there's still a lot of potential for Bloom teams to grow with future units. Moving on to another playstyle that Nahida enables, this is the Reverse Melt comp. Reverse Melt teams before would consist of Cryo units comped with Bennett and Xiangling. The idea is that Xiangling and Bennett apply Pyro fast enough for Cryo units like Kaya, Rosaria, or Ganyu to reverse melt on. Cryo also does not consume the Pyro aura right away, so with someone like Ganyu or Chongyun, they can do multiple melts in an instant. There's also a variant of Reverse Melt that incorporates the Sunfire combo, which is Bennett and Jean. Jean can continuously swirl the self-applied Pyro by Bennett's burst, thereby applying it to nearby enemies that you can Reverse Melt on. Nahida's Reverse Melt mechanic involves her Tri-Karma proc. If you apply Pyro and Nahida's skill on an enemy, you'll initiate the burning reaction which gives the enemy a Pyro aura. But since her Tri-Karma can trigger as long as any reaction triggers on the marked enemy, including Melt, then she can re-trigger burning on the enemy as long as the Pyro aura is still present on them. For the first Melt showcase, we have Ganyu as the Cryo DPS. Then you'll need a Pyro unit who will help initiate the burning. Bennett is a top recommendation since he provides both an attack buff and healing to Ganyu. Though technically other Pyro options can work, it's just that Bennett really boosts this team's damage. For the flex slot, a shielder would be preferable to prevent Ganyu from being interrupted. If you don't have Zhongli, you can use Diona or Tank Fei for shield substitutes. You can still opt to run without a shielder, though that'll be risky and can result in too many interruptions. However, there is a tricky aspect to Nahida's Reverse Melt mechanics which you'll especially want to note with Ganyu. Take a look at this clip. You'll notice that I'm continuously firing Ganyu's Frostflake charged shots at an enemy afflicted with burning and Nahida's mark. However, by the third shot, the Pyro aura has disappeared, which means Ganyu can no longer re-trigger a melt. Then you'd instead have to reapply Pyro to restart the burning. The problem is because of the Tri-Karma not proccing, which fails to restart the burning aura and makes the Pyro completely consumed by Ganyu's Cryo application. Let's break it down more slowly. Ganyu's first Frostflake arrow triggers Tri-Karma, which re-triggers burning and lets Ganyu do melt twice. In the second charged shot, the Frostflake bloom triggers Tri-Karma, which again re-triggers burning. In the third charged shot, no more Tri-Karma is procced and the Pyro aura has expired. So if you want to melt more charged shots, one solution is to time them so they can re-trigger Tri-Karma on hit while the Pyro aura is active to restart the burning. It's something that can take practice, but there are some workarounds. You can play it safe and just aim at the ground, so it's only her Frostflake blooms that hit the burning targets and melt. This method won't give you timing issues, but it also wastes Ganyu's double melt potential. Another trick involves timing the Tri-Karma and burning auras. 1. Apply Pyro and Denjo for burning. 2. Do not use Ganyu's skill as that can accidentally apply Cryo at the wrong time which disrupts the burning reapplication. 3. Do 2 full charged shots. The burning aura will not be consumed. 4. Wait just a bit for the Denjo aura to disappear. Then 5. Repeat steps 3 and 4 until you need to restart the rotation. Generally, you'll want to get in 4 charged shots. The alternative to doing your charged shots in sets of 2 is to just wait a bit after each charged shot. It's up to you which you find easier to time or get a rhythm of, but either way, the short pause maintains the synchronization with the Tri-Karma proc. Ganyu can be directly substituted for Rosaria such that Rosaria's burst will melt on each tick. Since Rosaria's burst is off-field, you have more flexibility to rotate Bennett and Nahida and reapply Pyro and Dendro. The main disadvantage of this team is that the melts are limited by Rosaria's AoE. But one question is, can we push this with 2 Cryo units like Kaya and Rosaria who made up a standard double reverse melt team? Unfortunately, there can be many instances where burning could not reapply fast enough for the melts to consistently happen. However, if you have C6 Bennett, then this actually becomes very doable. Since his C6 infuses your melee units with Pyro, you can keep inserting normal attacks in between switching characters to keep the Pyro application going or restart burning. It's an interesting way that burning becomes more viable, and Nahida's kit opens up potential for future Cryo units if they can synergize with her burning mechanics. Another type of comp you can make via burning is by throwing Overload in, giving us what we can call an OverBurn team. This uses a template of Nahida, a Pyro, and an Electro on a full EM build to trigger the overloads. If your Electro unit is proccing overloads efficiently, it will deplete the burning aura fairly quickly. Hence, this needs you to consistently reapply Pyro to maintain the burning, which can be achieved by having enough sources of Pyro. The main limitation of this team is similar to usual Overload teams, in that it's generally best to use it against heavy enemies that won't suffer the knockback of Overload reactions. This team uses Lisa who, aside from using her burst, can spam normal and charged attacks to proc overloads. Of course, there are other full EM built Electro unit alternatives. Bennett's self-applied Pyro will be swirled and infused by Kazuha for consistent Pyro reapplication. Sucrose could also work here, Kazuha just has more convenient mechanics. And the Viridescent set will also boost overload damage since it counts as Pyro damage. But there's also Xiangling as an alternative for her Pyro application and damage. This can also be done with a Jean Bennett Sunfire combo. Lastly, you've probably already heard of this insane comp named Sundering Furry. Bennett C6 infuses Razor's physical attacks with Pyro while his burst applies Electro. He's also driving Synchro, and through Nahida, this generates cores that can be Burgeoned or Hyperbloomed alongside the various Electrocharged, Vaporized, Aggravate, and Overloads that will appear. Since Razor will be the one proccing those, he will want an EM build and enough ER to maintain his burst uptime. However, this team won't have the same magic if your Bennett isn't C6, since Razor won't have any means to infuse Pyro. Because of the overloads involved, it's also preferred to use this team on heavy enemies. To learn more about this team, check out Zajeff's awesome in-depth video on it, which I'll link in the description. And that closes my video series on Nahida team showcases. I had a lot of fun testing all these Nahida teams and I really love how much she elevates them. Of course, there are more unusual teams out there, so if you've been playing one, go ahead and comment them down below. Or let me know if you have a favorite among the ones I showcased here. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already, and I will see you all soon. Take care!